Hello, historical people, Order of the Blade people. Wes here again from the garage. One day I'll find a decent recording location, but today is not that day. What I wanted to go over, somewhat briefly, maybe, we'll see. Moving offline, okay? Monday session, we did a little session on moving offline, the benefits of it, difficulties of it, and we saw some really interesting stuff actually. The way it was laid out is we literally had a pair of longsworders, then a pair of single-handers, and then a pair of dual-wielders. You know, each in their little sets doing their drills, and it was really interesting because they all had totally different issues, which I'm kind of going to go over here, to be honest, because I found it quite interesting, and maybe you will too. So the reason we're looking at moving offline, we had a seminar at one of the Midlands musters ran by the Order of the Blade, the club that we're part of. And Tobias and his team, who are visiting from Exmoor, I believe, were talking about their thoughts on springing and coming round. And it's probably a terrible example, but yeah, really springing round and landing a hit there. And the reason that's useful is obviously you take yourself completely off the line of attack, and then the way your strike's set up, you have stronger mechanics there. But anyway, we thought we'd carry on and dig into the concepts of moving offline in a more sort of general aspect. So I'll let the students kind of free for all in a way, kind of just play with it in their own regards, where defenders stepping offline, attackers stepping offline, etc., etc. So one of the big dangers we found about moving offline, and more importantly, when you're trying to attack, so I'm trying to attack my little stickmate here. Now, from this point, no matter how much I step this way or this way, all they really have to do is a small adjustment. You know, like with me, for me to move my point all the way over there, it's a very small adjustment with my hands, okay? So the difference between me delivering a cut here and delivering a cut here is just quite a small rotation, doesn't really make much of a difference, as far as I'm concerned. So we did find that moving offline seemed to be more beneficial for the defender, especially where longsword was concerned, because as the defender, once you've got that parry in, you've kind of got the initiative, let's say, to come offline either as you parry, so as a parry, or after a parry and then strike in with something. So we noticed that defenders were having a lot of success there. I'll quickly just recap why would we want to move offline. Basically, it creates different angles for you to send attacks down. If I'm just attacking here, they just have to block there. Whereas if I come round, even if it's just an extra foot or so, that attack is coming around, and what might have defended them here, they'll look something like this, and they'll just be open by that little extra bit. So it's about getting around people's guards. That's why you move offline. But like we say, yeah. So we found that defenders had more success in general if they move offline. They typically came out better off. Whereas the attackers did struggle more. Also, differences. So longsword, because let's just call it a structured weapon, because I need to put a lot of structure behind this thing, because I'm using two hands, and kind of where the sword goes, my body goes, right? These angles are really important because we're one for one weapon, because it's one weapon on one weapon, and my structure follows that weapon. You can really open up different angles on each other, and the use of your strong and your weak are really pronounced, I suppose is the right way to say it. It does make quite a bit of difference. Whereas we found And yes, I fixed the poker saber. We've welded the bolt back on. So we'll see how long this one lasts now. But we found with single handers, okay, to be fair, the guys were both using side swords, I believe. So it might have been a touch longer and definitely more point focused anyway. But with the single handers, moving offline didn't quite give you the same kind of effect as it did with the longsword. Namely because structure-wise tend to be a little more linear, a little more extended, so we don't really have the full use of the binding mechanics that we would with the longsword and all the structure behind it. And also, they were engaging kind of more from this distance as opposed to with the longsword. Once your first attack's in, you're kind of a bit more locked in, a bit closer. And maybe that's just the way we were playing. Maybe that's not. Maybe one of us were doing something wrong in either regard. But we did find that with the single-handers, there was less of an effect from moving offline. That was both on the offense and the defense. It was a lot more of a subtle change. Obviously, when we're thinking of saber and stuff, obviously more explosive jumping to either side will definitely do a bit more. They were doing all sorts of weird shit, like the fucking whatever that stuff is, and they were practicing balestra lunges and all sorts of weird stuff. So they were definitely getting the money's worth that session. But yeah, they definitely found trying to move offline more difficult. Especially it was just like an offline lunge as well. Like we found that didn't really give the single-hander much of an advantage at all. But only one little test subject there. Interesting thing that we did find though was with the dual wielders. Now, like I say, we're moving offline to try and create these angles, okay? And when we're one weapon on one weapon, those angles are very much there. They're very much a focal point of what we're doing. I noticed with the dual wielders, and again, in fairness to them, one person had kind of blades like this, the other had some like crazy Chinese hook blade things, so there was a lot of other issues, let's say, to succeed in there. But kind of as a general rule is when you'd move to try and open that angle, there's another weapon there, there's another thing there. And thinking back to some of the sword and shield plays that we've been doing, there's a lot of times where you're trying to chip around the shield. And I know it sounds silly going shield side, but their sword isn't where the shield is, so you're in less danger and they have to do something. But you do find that you just don't have the gaps, obviously shield side, but these dual wielders were finding as they were trying to work their way around, they're still dealing with another weapon. So this angle we're trying to create kind of isn't there because there's something else ready to deal with it. To be honest, the dual wielding just turned into utter chaos, if I'm quite honest. It was quite a beautiful thing to see, but it made very little sense. They were doing all sorts. It was just clash, 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 clash. Someone got hit. Both of them got hit. It was a bit mad. But general rule then. So moving offline, there were benefits to it and there's a purpose behind it. You may find you struggle on the offensive to then push those online movements. Overall, we found the best time to execute any kind of offline movements, anything like that, was on the second intention, so the kind of second action of whatever play you've gone for, whatever attack you're going for, okay? So let me put these down. I'll go back to longsword for the sake of it, but if I come in with a nice standard cut, overhaul, whatever, this is where I sort of want to look to move offline, even if it's just a little sidestep and a pivot. to gain myself more distance. Found a couple of people really finding that quite useful. So they would send the cut in and then they'd move offline holding that center line. Found that okay. And then obviously once I'm in here and I have the bind, then I can move off and deliver a bigger strike. I realise I'm probably out of the bloody camera there. So hopefully I've not just ran away for half the video. But yeah, obviously when we see people moving offline in the first intention, so like initially on the attack, with longsword you do still get some benefits from, you know, the standard thing. Loads of the manuals do say to step off to the side and things like that when you throw your attacks, and there's a reason for it. But any kind of attempted movement in the initial intention, in the initial action, does tend to get read by the opponent a lot better, and the defender's able to sort of counteract that fairly easily. Maybe they're just used to it more or whatever. But we definitely found that the second intention and, you know, subsequent intentions, so sometimes the third or whatever, like, that was a better time to start moving side to side when you're attacking. Defenders, because of how that kind of lines up, you're almost starting from the second intention, if that makes sense, because you've already had to parry or deal with a strike. So it's kind of the same, but to a defender, you can get away with moving offline on your first action, so to speak. So yeah, so those are the kind of differences. So obviously it's a smaller correction for the defender when somebody else is moving offline, or when the attacker is moving offline. Different weapons handle it totally differently. It was a real shame we didn't have a sword and shield group going yesterday, otherwise I'd have liked to have had a bit more of a eyes on that. Yeah, you want to create those angles where you can and get around people's guards, but you can't always just jump into that. There has to be that level of setup, whether that's your first action, your third action, whatever. And when you get into sparring, you know, it's a lot more difficult because some of the light touches and things like that, you don't really get to sit in distance in the position that would be good to then start stepping offline at. So yeah, we didn't get to practice any sort of offline retreating, so striking and then running away. I'm going to give that a go on Monday in some of the sparring, I think. See if it works for us. And yeah, it was interesting to see. And I think there's a bit more to play with there. So yeah, I'll give it a go. Anyway, that'll be all from me for now. If you do like me rambling about total nonsense involving swords and historical martial arts, then obviously like and subscribe. Share the video around if you think anyone else will find it interesting. It'd be nice to have like more than 3 subscribers or whatever we're on. And yeah, like I say, hopefully been useful for a few of you. And I'll see you in a bit. Bye bye.